Hey everyone, in this video, I'll be giving my thoughts and opinions and experience on high volume shooting and melee versus high quality or high strength shooting and melee. So, without further ado, get into the video. Hope you guys enjoy. Now, to start off, what do I mean by, high volume and high quality shooting and or melee? And what I mean more is high volume means just large amount of attacks that a unit can make against a given target. So, you know, uh, bolt guns doing, 2 attacks, and then if we're talking about Sororitas or Chaos Space Marine bolt guns, they have rapid fire 1 or rapid fire 2. So, you add more attacks, and that's amongst all models in that unit. So if you have a unit of 5 Chaos Space Marines, just in this example, they can make 20 attacks. I know CSM don't have rapid fire on their bolt guns, but just as an example for the sake of it. And then high quality just means more of like high strength weapons. So Melta guns, Melta rifles, las cannons, even plasma guns and plasma incinerators, I would argue, fall into the category of higher strength weapons. Now, segueing into thoughts and experience, typically, actually, as far as back as I can remember, like pretty much ever since getting into Warhammer 40k, starting with space, Ultramarines, Space Marines, and then moving into Chaos Space Marines, dipping my toes into Leagues of Votann, and then, playing Black Templars more recently, and pretty much sticking with them and Chaos Space Marines. I've always used at least like 2 vehicles that have both high volume shooting and high quality shooting. So, a lot of attacks and a lot of strength. Some examples being Gladiator Lancers, Repulsor Executioners, Chaos Lantern Raiders, Redemptor Dreadnoughts. The list goes on. And to that end, from my own personal experience, I personally prefer volume over quality with regards to both shooting and melee. Because from what I've personally found is that a las cannon from a Predator Destructor or Predator Annihilator is swingy. Now, yeah, it's not a casino cannon like the conversion beamer on a land fortress or a Sagittar from the Leagues of Votann, but it's still a matter of it's one attack hitting on threes. Yeah, it's strength 12 if I'm remembering the stats right. AP -3, damage is D6 +1. It's gonna hurt. If it hits something and it wounds whatever you're shooting at, it's gonna hurt. But you have the whole issue. You have the somewhat issue, at least just from my own experience, of the things you want to shoot las cannons into don't get wounded by the las cannons, but they get wounded by the bolters or the heavy bolters or the equivalents. And that same thing plays into melee, right? In my experience with melee units and predominantly playing melee armies, volume has kind of always beaten out quality, even though Sword Brethren kind of break away from that because the Mastercrafted Power Swords or Mastercrafted Power Weapons, I would say, are in that weird in between of they're not necessarily high strength weapons, but because of their lethal hits, they may as well be so, because you're bound to roll some 6s in a 4-man or 5, a 4 model or 5 model unit army or a unit of Sword Brethren. If they're being led by Castellan and Marshall, you're rerolling your hit rolls and you're critting on 5s. So just the likelihood of getting some wounds through without needing to roll is pretty there. But I'd say, if anything, they're kind of an anomaly. Just as an example of some units I've personally used when playing Space Marines, Black Templars, and Chaos Space Marines, Sword Brethren, Assault Intercessors, Repulsor Executioners, Redemptor Dreadnoughts, or what I've primarily used in Black Templars, and to a lesser extent, and to an extent also with just standard Space Marines. Take the Sword Brethren out in that case. And then with regards to Chaos Space Marines, it's been primarily Chosen, Legionnaires, Possessed, Predators, either Annihilators or Destructors, and a Chaos Land Raider. Now, and once again, looping back around to it, from my own personal experience, high strength or high quality weapons or weapon options on a data sheet for a vehicle or even for infantry, in my opinion, just feels too swingy. Or at least it feels too swingy unless you have a lot of bodies within that unit that have that gun. Havocs or Centurions are, I'd say, examples that come to my mind of like that. On top of that, to the point of them feeling swingy, they also feel swingy when you need them to not be. So like shooting a las cannon or a melta gun or melta rifle or a heavy laser destroyer into a land raider or repulsor, vehicles that are toughness 12 or higher, you're firing weapons at them that are strength 12 or higher, or in the case of the melta gun and melta rifle, lower, and they just aren't, I'd say, reliably punching holes into stuff, at least without maybe external support from unit abilities, stratagems, or detachment rules. There are some thoughts and acknowledgements and considerations with regards to this topic. There are some units that I know have a lot of high strength / high quality shooting. Some immediate examples are Devastator Centurion squads, the Repulsor Executioner, the Bane Blade, Chaos Havocs for Chaos Space Marines, battle suits, battle suit units, I think just in like the broad stroke for the Tau. There are plenty of units where it's like they have a lot of guns. Either like it's one unit, it's one model that has a lot of guns, like the Bane Blade and the Repulsor Executioner, and a good handful of those guns are, strength 8 or higher weapons. Or you have, in the case of like Centurions, where each of them have a twin las cannon, so that's one shot, but you can run a unit of 6 Centurions, so there's 6 las cannons on top of their twin storm bolters or twin fragstorm grenade launchers. So they may not be fast, they may not be getting anywhere anytime soon, but hey, that's 6 las cannons able to plink plonk at something from 48 inches away, and they're gonna hurt. Moving down the points, quality shooting and melee tend to be either on vehicles or main damage dealing infantry. Now what I mean by that is more of like high strength weapons tend to be on vehicles, I think, with the real exception just being like dedicated transports, or on infantry units where it's like, they needed, like, their goal, their purpose is to do hurting. It's to take models off the board. Sword Brethren, fit into that. Repulsors, either the standard repulsor or the executioner. Bane Blades and the variants of it as a vehicle. Tau battle suits, I think, as a whole. Those, at least to my knowledge and experience, are examples of, on average, high strength, good quality shooting or melee, and it's that. And to that end, you tend to pay a points premium to field a lot of that. So like if you want a lot of good shooting or really strong melee that's like strength 5 or higher, you're going to be paying a points premium for that. And in some cases, or I think in most cases, it wouldn't be worth it. Now, as an acknowledgement and consideration, and I said this in the previous slide, quality shooting, high strength shooting, and melee almost always is going to feel swingy when you're rolling the dice to see, hey, does my last cannon hit the target? Okay, now does it wound? Okay, cool. Now does the enemy fail their check, their save to to get for the AP? And then you roll for the damage, and then you see, oh, did I do 7 damage or did I do 2 damage? It's like that for melta guns, it's like that for multi-meltas, it's like that for las cannons, heavy laser destroyers, even some like Imperial Knight weapons and what have you. It's gonna feel swingy. And with high volume attack, like high volume data sheets, so like chain swords, you have a unit of assault intercessors charge something of chain swords, and if all of those guys can get into combat, you're looking at like 20 something, like 20 attacks, 20 strength 4 attacks, hitting on 3s, AP -1, damage 1. It's nothing terribly special, but it's when you start getting into, you just start throwing a lot of that at something. So like, let's say it isn't a unit of 5 assault intercessors, it's a unit of 10, or 2 units of 10, or 3 units of 5, just charging one thing, and all those models can get into engagement with that targeted unit. They're just going to inevitably, they're just going to chip away at its ankles, and they're going to take it down if it's proving to be tough. And that's to the point. And then to the point, like to my last bullet point of addressing sword brethren, as them as an example, strength 5 mastercraft their power weapon. It's not necessarily high. I mean, if you're attacking anything that's toughness 10, assuming you're not taking the accept any challenge out of the odds, you're wounding on 6s. That isn't great. You take accept any challenge out of the odds from their army rule, you're wounding on 5s. You crit on 5s, or you're wounding on 5s, and you crit on 5s to roll the hit. Given you run 4 or 5 sword brothers with a Ravada, with a marshal at the very least, to make them crit on 5s, they're gonna get stuff through. Their low strength weapons are gonna end up getting wounds through, and because it's 2 damage and it's AP -2, likely to get stuff in. If anything, I would say that sword brethren, and even like Grey Knights as a whole, as a faction, sit in this weird place of their melee is in the weird, like, it's not, I wouldn't say like low quality, like it's bad melee, because it is by no means bad, but it's not like super duper high volume. You just have like crap loads of attacks flying out. But with that, guys, that'll be the end of my like thoughts and kind of opinions and acknowledgements of volume versus quality shooting in melee in a 40k, and just my experience with it and how it's tended to fare for me. What kind of experiences have you had? Have you had good experiences with just spamming a lot of guys that just shoot a bunch but don't, like, they're likely not to wound or likely not to hit, or the damage they do isn't very good? Or has it been the opposite? You just have a bunch of tanks that only shoot one time, but with their big guns, but their big guns are like, when they hit something, they're wounding on 2s, and or worse, but they're likely to wound and then really just punch into something. And then of course, let me know in the comment section down below if you'd like to see more content like this in the future. Once again, I want to thank you guys all for watching and listening, liking, sharing the video, subscribing, commenting. All that's very much appreciated. I do have a new camera. This is the first video I'm using for this camera, so it's a different setup, still getting used to it. But with that, guys, hope you guys have a great time wherever you may find yourself, whether you're at work, at school, or you're on your way home from either of those to hang out and relax. Then I hope you're doing well. And if things aren't going well or going poorly, I hope they can turn around and get better for you. But until the next time, guys, I'll see you next time. Peace.